All right, guys, so welcome back. How was lunch? Good? You've been learning some things, right? There's a couple of things I'm going to do before we finish up today with you guys. The first one is to talk about the idea of frame control. There are essentially three kinds of frames I want to talk to you about today. There's lots of different ways of dealing with frame control, but the three I want to talk about are pre-frames, reframes, and deframes. First of all, let's have a little chat about what we mean by frame control. How do you understand what something means? I'll report to you the context, the content of a conversation. Let's see if you can make any meaning of it. Will you? No. Do you have any idea what's going on there?
No context.
There's no context, is there? Right? Without knowing the context, you have no idea what it means, right? Let's imagine we have two guys standing at a bar. One's holding a bottle, shaking it a little bit, saying, "Will you?" The other guy says, "No." Do you understand what's going on now? Let's try another version. Let's say there's a couple in a restaurant, and the dessert trolley just comes past, and the waiter says, "Will you?" And they say, "No." A different scenario, right? Another scenario. Man's on his knees with a little box open, says, "Will you?" Heartbreaking, isn't it? But just think about this. The exact same conversation means totally different things based on what context, what frame you put around it. Another example, this is from the home study course. You're driving a car, you're standing at the traffic lights, the lights are red, and you hear a siren, and in the mirror you see an ambulance with its lights on. It goes zooming past you right through the crossroads. How do you feel about that? Normal, right? Just to contrast this, right in the wake of the ambulance, the space made by the ambulance driving through, there's a guy in his red Ferrari with his, trophy wife sitting next to him, blonde hair streaming in the wind, rock and roll playing in the car stereo. And he goes through the same red traffic light right behind the ambulance. How do you feel about that? Good, right? It's like, good on you, well done, that's it, break the law. Same event, but very different interpretation, isn't it? Let's see if we can do some frame control about those events and see if we can change your emotional reaction. The ambulance, as it's speeding across the crossroads, you see the back door swing open. There's a bunch of students in the back getting drunk and partying. They just stole the ambulance for fun. Does it change your reaction? What if I tell you that the man driving the car, that's his wife in there, she's pregnant, she fell down some stairs, he's rushing her to hospital to save the baby? Have you just changed your opinion of the whole thing? Who is getting a sense that controlling the frame in a conversation might be of importance? Anyone? So the three kinds of frames that I'd like to introduce you to here today are pre-frames, reframes, and deframes. A pre-frame is basically a frame you present before the information, so that the information itself is interpreted in relationship to it. When I gave that little scenario, man's on his knees with a little box in his hand that's open, that's creating a frame for you, isn't it? It's a cultural frame. You say that to someone who, I know, grew up in the jungles of South America, it might not mean the same thing to them. They go, "What, box? What's he doing? I don't know." But you've made a leap, a conclusion as to what the context of that situation is. And so the situation, the actual words, mean something different, right? So pre-frame is anything you say ahead of time to color or transform the way someone will understand something. A reframe is something you do after the effect, when it's already gone wrong. A deframe is particularly interesting, in my opinion, because you make the problem irrelevant. It's kind of like a reframe, but rather than actually changing their opinion of it, it just becomes irrelevant. I'd like to give you some examples of this. Let's say you have the idea of a pre-frame. Let's say you're selling houses, right? A pre-frame might be something like along the lines of, what kind of neighborhood are you looking for? Are you looking for something for a budget, but it's not necessarily too nice? Or are you looking to spend some money for the kind of place that, the kind of quality place you're looking for? And they'll say, oh, actually more of a budget today. Or I'm looking to spend some money for a quality place, right? Now, whichever they choose, they've pre-framed themselves, haven't they? If they now go to a house and go, well, I don't like this very much, we said, well, you chose the budget route. This is kind of what comes with the territory, right? Similarly, if they go to the nice area and go, oh, this is a great house, but it costs too much. Well, I thought you said you wanted to spend money on a place that's nice. Or do you want to go to the other end of town? Do you get the idea? In a reframe, you're going to change their perception of the event. And this is something from NLP, which is quite a nice description of it. There's two reframes that NLP likes to make a distinction of. There's different ways of doing this, but these are very useful ways of looking at it. They talk about context and meaning reframes. You don't have to remember the labels. What's important is the general idea. In a context reframe, you basically change the context. You find out, where would this actually be useful, right? Here's an example of a context reframe. Again, this is from one of the NLP books. Father comes into the therapist and says, you've got to change my daughter. She's far too willful and stubborn. And the therapist essentially says, you're right. You should bring her straight away and so we can fix her, so that when she's 16 years old and sitting in the back of a car with a young man, she'll do exactly what she's told. You can hear the reframe there, right? You can't quite look at her stubbornness the same way anymore, can he? The meaning reframe, again from the Annals of NLP, which again is a very nice example of it. I think Leslie Cameron Bandel did this one. This is back in the 60s and 70s, well, actually the 70s, when, you remember those shag pile carpets that were apparently a pain to maintain? So this woman is obsessed with having the perfect shag pile carpet with all the strands going the right way. And she's getting infuriated when her family walks in it and leave footprints on it, because she spends hours hoovering this thing, right? She's infuriated by it. So the therapist kind of leads her through a nice little visualization, like, you see the perfect house, and there's your carpet, and it's beautiful, every little hair in the right direction, it's all perfectly angled, not a footprint in sight. And that means that everyone you love has gone. Ouch. So why not put a few footprints on there to let you know they're home? Can you feel the impact of the reframe? Yeah? Do you understand the nature of reframes? A deframe basically makes the objection of the idea irrelevant, right? In therapy, it's very useful if you're a therapist, although it's actually useful in everyday life as well. Just a therapeutic example came to mind. How many therapists in the room again? Just hands up. Now, you'll probably come across this, right? What's the problem? I don't know. I have a fear of heights. Great. Tell me a little bit about it. Well, I've got a fear of heights and so on. But then my grandmother, she comes in and she keeps telling me, like, yeah. And every time and then of course, everyone keeps telling me what to do and I get frustrated. They're going to go off on a diatribe, right? In a deframe, you'll ask them, well, tell me, what is it you're trying to work on here? Are you trying to work through your fear of heights or being more assertive with your grandmother? Which is it? Well, I'm here for the heights. So can we put the whole idea with your grandmother to one side so we can focus on this and maybe come back to that another time? Well, really, but I don't need to deal with that. That's fine. You can deal with that now, or you can deal with this. Which do you want? Well, I want to do the heights. So are you telling me then that we want to put the grandmother to one side so you can actually deal with this now, and we can focus on that another time? Yes. Now they can no longer bring up the grandmother issue. Do you see how that works? You can deframe it equally well in other situations. The sales example is another one, right? The house is too expensive. Well, you realize that the neighborhood you've asked for, this is the only neighborhood where you can guarantee your children's safety. So it's up to you. Do you have a price tag on your children's safety? It's a harsher version, I understand. But you get the idea. The idea of price becomes irrelevant at this point, doesn't it? Do you get the idea of those three different types of frames? What I'd like you to do is get into, we'll organize this into groups of 10, just because we'll stay in that in a moment's time for other things as well. So organize this into groups of 10, and we'll do a little bit of stuff on frame control then, okay? So go ahead and do that now, and we'll come back in a second. All right, so here's the exercise. Inside of your group, I'd like you to take turns for, each person take turns to come up with a ridiculously extreme, totally implausible scenario of doom. Doom and gloom. For example, my entire family just got wiped out by pygmy monkeys. Don't know why. So it's an extreme situation, right? The job of the other people in your group is to reframe that in as ridiculously extreme a way as the actual problem was. So something along the lines of, well, great, at least you'll be saving a lot of money at Christmas. Do you get the idea? Now, please, when I say extreme scenarios of doom and gloom, I mean totally unrealistic one. Please do not have any real content in there from your own life. Make sense? I want something extreme that's out there, aliens ate my hamster and stuff like that, All right, guys, off you go. So how was that? Was that fun? Yes. Quite easy to do, right? You're getting the sense of the principle behind this, right? Not all reframes will happen instantly like that and be instantly accepted. But what if you were to produce the reframes as part of your yes set and your hijacking process when no comes up? Because when a problem comes up, really, isn't that a indirect way of saying no? Yeah? So what about this idea of pre-framing? What you do in your groups right now is take one of those scenarios that they gave you, the monkeys, cutting bits of your family or whatever, because it happens sometimes. And knowing that someone is likely to bring that objection up, that problem up, I'd like you as a group to brainstorm, how can I present my reframe before they even say anything about this crazy situation, so that they can't even bring it up because it's just become almost irrelevant. You get the idea? Let's go try a little bit of thinking. What can I say to introduce this whole topic so that if someone did have his family tragically massacred by pygmy monkeys, they wouldn't bring it up? Allow me to give you an example of this. That was probably a good example, but I don't know idea what you said. Let me give you an example of this in a more mundane sort of way. I got this from a stage hypnotist doing a talk on hypnosis some years ago, and he had a great opening presentation where he said something to the effect of, folks, people have all kinds of strange idea about what hypnosis is and what suggestions are. Many are surprised to find out that the ideas they've cherished the most are absolutely wrong. Just take a step back. Just think about what I've just said there. Basically, I've said to you, I'm about to say something about suggestion. If you agree with me, you're wise and you're correct. If you disagree with me, you're incorrect and a little bit stupid. So, who wants to take the risk of disagreeing with me now? That is essentially the frame that he presented. Do you get the idea of this? Do you understand the idea of pre-framing? Yeah? So in your groups, just take a few minutes, brainstorm, just pick one of the more extreme scenarios, and brainstorm how can you introduce a topic where if someone did have that problem, it would come up, but then present it in such a way that they can no longer bring it up. Off you go. It's an engaging activity, isn't it? Thinking about the pre-frames. Let me give you two methods for pre-framing. One is easier, but not as eloquent. The other one requires more thought, but is actually more eloquent and actually more effective because of it. The first method of pre-framing is just basically reframing before it's happened. So the idea is you basically bring up the objection yourself so you can handle it in the way that you need to, right? The classic one is, I'm about to take you into a very expensive area here. Now, tell me now if you can't afford that sort of a house in a nice area, right? You hear the reframe in there. I put it a bit more bluntly so it's more obvious. But the idea is, once we get there, it's too late for you to start moaning about the price, essentially, right? So basically, all the reframes you came up with beforehand, let's talk about the Christmas presents one. The very simple, blunt version of it might be, we're going to talk about families and stuff like that. Now, if you happen to not have a family because they got murdered by pygmy monkeys, just consider the fact that Christmas will be a lot easier for you now, right? So I'm literally reframing it before they have a chance to actually bring it up themselves. Do you get the idea? Do another one, or someone give me a problem that I might come across. Go ahead. So a meteorite hits...
a meteorite hits your family home, and you're outside or tending to the car, and it gets wiped out.
Great. So a meteorite hit your family home, your whole family's dead.
And the pre-frame that we did is we talked about, this was our idea at least, we said, nature is a cruel and fickle beast. There are many things that happen outside of our control. The seasons come and go. Mm-hmm. And that might be a way that you could say, well, it's a completely natural act. Yeah. There was nothing that could be done, so forth.
Well, that could be one of the more subtle versions of the pre-frame. I'm actually thinking more the blunt one. And remember, we're doing this in the context of a ridiculous scenario, hence, we're not trying to make it good, we're just making it funny, right? So let's take the idea, meteorite hit my house, whole family's dead. Great. Not only will you save money on taxes on your house, but money on Christmas too, right? That might be the reframe. Now, if you're going to use that idea as a pre-frame, right? If you're going to use that idea as a pre-frame, then you might say something like, welcome to the Meteorological Association of whatever. If you're lucky enough to have had your house destroyed by a meteor, well, just consider the fact that A, you're going to be in the record books because it happens very rarely. B, you will save a ton of money on taxes. And C, if your family was inside, you will be saving a ton of money at Christmas too, right? Now realize, we've chosen an extreme situation in order to be able to give an extreme and ridiculous reframe so that it requires very little skill at this point. Would I ask you to do this in the real world in terms of something like that? No. When someone's family gets wiped out by a meteorite, say, you're not going to go into instant reframe. Okay, I know exactly how to make you feel better, right? This is, I hope you realize, not how it works, right? This is purely an exercise to get you thinking along the lines of how can you take a situation and turn it on the other side, right? For real issues, it will require still more subtle thinking. But how on earth are you going to get to the point of refining it to the subtle thinking if you haven't grasped the concept on a more gross level? Do you get the idea? So I'm going to encourage you again. Number one, take a problem that is ridiculous to the extreme. If you're not laughing at the problem because of its ridiculousness, then you haven't got the right problem. That's the first thing. Number two, your reframes should be equally ridiculous. Earlier on, you were laughing quite happily about them, right? That's exactly what it should be. Number three, your pre-frames should be just as ridiculous as your reframes were, because in fact, you could be using them. So in other words, if there's no amusement value in terms of the exercise, you're missing the point. You're just getting used to the structure in terms of how to move frames from one reference point to another, whilst you're totally finding the content irrelevant. Because otherwise, you're asking yourself to do too much to start with. Do you get the idea? So what I'd like you to do now, very quickly, in your groups, is come up again with a ridiculous idea, take turns coming up with ridiculous reframes, and once you find one you find particularly enjoyable, see if you can convert that reframe to a pre-frame by bringing the objection up yourself, reframing it before the other person gets a chance to do it. Do you get the idea? Yeah? All right, guys, let's do it again. Off you go. Okay, who's having a good time with that? Are you enjoying that? That's a little bit better. This is the having fun with this is going to get you much further than taking it too seriously to start with, because you just want to get used to the feel of maneuvering around different ideas like this. The final exercise in the series, what I wanted you to play with, is this. It's just deframing. In deframing, remember, we're making the problem irrelevant, right? I'll give you a real-world scenario, actually. My brother, it has happened to him some years ago now. He was driving along and got into a minor traffic accident, like a fender bender, right? And the woman whose car he hit, she was furious. And she's coming out like with fire spitting out of her mouth and claws ready to scratch. And she was ready to just really do some kind of emotional damage, I think. And quick as a flash, he gets out of the car, looks at her all concerned, and says, "Oh my God, are your children okay?" She stops in her tracks, looks in the car, looks back and goes, "Yes, they are, thank you." They changed details and it wasn't necessarily a pleasant situation, but all the furor that was about to ensue was totally diffused. Do you get the concept of a deframe? You're making the problem irrelevant. So let's just spend 2 minutes in your groups, again, with a ridiculous problem, but figure out a way of essentially reframing it so that the problem is irrelevant, not that its context or its meaning has changed. You get the idea? Off you go. Okay, guys, who has more of a sense of how frame control works now? Yes? Do take the time to play this game, just the ridiculous version of it, because what you're doing is you're creating a mental mindset that starts switching information around to look at other ways to look at the information, and also anticipates problems and figures out ways ahead of time how to deal with those problems before they come, to inoculate against them. Do you get the idea? So it's a very useful thing. Particularly pre-framing is one of the most useful things or tools in your toolkit as a conversational hypnotist, because it allows you to avoid problems before they even begin. It's totally invisible if you do it well. Do you get the idea? So what I want to do now is just to finish up the training, is to give you one last hypnotic process which I think you'll enjoy. In order to do this, I'm going to ask you to find one person in your group to work with, and you're going to be working with them for the several cycles. So if you don't like them, don't choose them. So go ahead and choose a partner.
It's still not very clear in my mind the distinction between reframing and deframing. It seems
Okay.
like I've got a lot of bleed over.
Well, to be honest with you, that's quite all right, in the sense that these are all artificial distinctions anyways. Think of deframing as a special kind of reframing in which you're making the problem basically irrelevant. In reframing, you're looking at the problem another way, so it's still within the context or the situation where the problem has something there. In deframing, it no longer exists. The masters of deframing are politicians, because they'll never answer the question you've asked them, they'll answer the question they wish you had asked them, right? So let's take an example. Let's say someone's got the agenda of pushing education, and you're the interviewer asking them, "So, what are you going to do to fix the economy?" And they go, "Well, what you need to understand is the economy is made up of people, and we need to basically fix our educational system, because then we'll have the right kind of people doing the work. So let's really address the educational system, that's really where the problem's at," right? So he's basically reframed the idea of the economy going to pot by deframing, making it irrelevant, and refocusing it on something that's more relevant in his eyes, which is the educational. Do you get the idea? So it's just another type of reframe, but it's important enough to separate out, because you're really making the objection irrelevant. Does that help?
I think so.
Okay. So, you're all with your partners, is that correct? Anyone not have a partner? Okay. So here's what I want you to do. We're going to spend literally 10 seconds or 20 seconds chatting to each other. What happened to your partner? Disappeared? In the void? Don't worry, the first few rounds are easy. So the first round is just literally 20 seconds, normal chit-chat, just as we did before lunch. Easy? Off you go. Easy to do, right? You've been here before. So the next one is, we're going to be moving the yes around a little bit. I don't want you to switch your H+ on yet, although you can start doing a little bit of it if you want. Whilst you're having a chit-chat, I want you to test the mindset of your partner. I want you to test it by looking for unconscious yeses and how easy they are to get. Not the conscious ones, although you can throw some of those in as well. You're testing for compliance. How willing are they to follow along with you when you give information, right? Don't make the information extreme. Just get a sense of, is this person overall being a little bit cantankerous, a little bit resistant, is it a little bit difficult to talk to? Or is it smooth, is it easy, is it generally an agreeable person? You're testing their mindset to see how active that critical factor is. In here, after 3 days of hypnosis, chances are it's going to be pretty compliant, right? However, you still want to get used to this idea of doing these tests as part of your conversation so you'll know what are you going to focus on. Does it make sense, everyone? So I just spent 30 seconds apiece. One person each pair, put your hand up. You're the hypnotist. You're still engaging in chit-chat, so you're going backwards and forwards. It's just you're the one doing most of the testing right now, and on the 30-second mark, they'll be doing most of the testing. Make sense? Off you go. Okay, that was easy, right? Are you noticing actually relatively subtle things as to whether or not they're agreeing with you? A little change in their facial expression, a little change in terms of their tonality, their voice, how easily they let you interrupt. These are all compliance tests, aren't they? Good. The next level is, once you've got enough compliance going on, you've satisfied yourself that their critical factor is at least a medium pace, not at a very high level, then you can switch on your H+. And make sure you, at this point, I just want you to lock eye contact and keep eye contact. If they look away, that's fine, but you're still looking at their eyes if they happen to be looking up. After that, continue with an H-chat. So still chit-chat, but with the more hypnotic qualities. Make sense? So we're going to give you a minute apiece for that. Okay, so far so easy, right? So the question then is, what happens if your compliance test fails? What do you do then? Are you going to switch on your H+ straight away? You can do little bits of it, but if you do too much, they're going to basically critically analyze or critically factor in what are you doing? Why are you looking at me? This is the risk you run, right? So you can turn on the H+ a little bit and kind of fractionate it. However, the things I recommend you do are things you already know how to do, which is collect yeses in different ways. If someone's critical factor is high, then you can still come up with information that they have to say yes to because it's within whatever they can agree with already, right? You also have the questioning hijacking cycle. Remember that? Works really well with only a very small amount of H+, in terms of you're still keeping the conversation going, you ask them about that, you find something within that to agree with, and then you go back to loop back to the yeses and so on. Get the idea? The other thing you can do, which is part of the what we just did a moment ago, this is where pre-frames and reframes become very valuable, right? Let me use a classic example like in hypnosis. Oh, I can't be hypnotized, right? Well, how come? Oh, only people with a weak mind can be hypnotized, right? So then you can start doing the idea of reframing or pre-framing. Oh, well, believe it or not, did you know that it actually requires more intelligence to be hypnotized than not, right? There's a little mind-bending pre-frame there, or reframe there. Other versions it might be to, if you feel a little bit cantankerous before, let's do the hypnosis session again. Before we start the hypnosis, a lot of people come in here and they think they can't be hypnotized. What they don't realize, of course, is that it happens every time. Now, unless you are incapable of falling asleep and learning anything, then you'll have been in a trance before, because that's the only way you can assimilate information. Do you know what I mean by that? So you hear the pre-frame going on there? In terms of reframing, one of the things I really love to do, especially it works well as a hypnotherapist, hence I'll share this one with you, is to take advantage of an incongruity in the context. Let me give an example of what I mean by this. You're a hypnotherapist, client comes in, sits down, he says, what's the problem? Smoker, 30 years, whatever. Great. You ready to start? You ready to quit? Well, I don't know if I can be hypnotized. Oh, that's wonderful. What on earth did you come and book a session with a hypnotherapist for if you can't be hypnotized? Can you hear the incongruity there? Oh, well, I thought maybe it could help. Well, that part of you that thought it might help, what's it trying? What is that thinking behind that? Well, if I could get to that part where I could make all these changes, then it'll be great. Excellent. So let's deframe. Let's put the other rest of you to one side for a moment and focus on that part of you, the one that made you come in here. Because obviously, despite the fact that you don't believe this will work, you're still here. So it must be pretty powerful. Do you see how we're working with this? Can you understand the importance of pre-framing and reframing, and in this case, deframing the incongruity of a situation? Yes? You get the idea? So you have enough stuff there to get things going with, to basically start eroding the critical factor enough that when you then get to the H+, the more overt, intense gaze, but with a very friendly mannerisms, they're less likely to pop out and go, what are you doing? Why are you looking at me like this? This is not making me feel comfortable and so on, right? The next step I want to look into is, whether you've done it before or not, we're going to go right back into collecting some yeses. Why? Because the more the merrier. The more yeses you get, the better it'll be, right? When I say this, of course, you can still use all of your language skills. So your language softeners, your power words, your trance themes, all this sort of stuff will fit very nicely within the yes set area. Get the idea? Any questions? All right, 1 minute apiece, off you go. So far, so good? Now, for the next cycle, again, we're going to start off from the beginning with a chit-chat all the way through to these things. I want you to choose a specific context, a specific idea in terms of influencing. For now, let's make it simple, and the idea that you want your partner to feel confident to use conversation hypnosis when they go home. Just a simple framework. If you'd rather do something else, by all means do so, but use that as your default if you can't think of anything else to do right now. Make sense to you guys, yeah? We're going to start again with the same chit-chat, and of course in your chit-chat you're testing for compliance, but also getting some information about how they're feeling in general and so on. Switch on your H+, lock your gaze, start grabbing or getting some yeses from them, or use your language and so on. The next thing I want you to do is work your way into the piggyback principle. In particular, you want to piggyback in ideas or pre-frames around the idea, in this case, of confidence or whatever else would fit the situation you have in mind. You get the idea? The reason I'm giving you a context is because otherwise you have no idea what pre-frames to make, because pre-frames relate to a context. Everyone clear on that? Let's give you a minute and a half for this one, so you have a little bit longer to play around with that. All right, guys? Off you go. Okay, so far so easy, right? So we're going to have the same. I'm going to give you a little bit longer now, 2 minutes apiece. Same conversation again, same sort of steps you're going to go through. This time, the step I want you to emphasize, so you can still hit those steps, but of course, just move through them a bit more quickly this time. What I want you to emphasize this time is I want you to revivify some positive emotion that could be of use to you in this context. So, of course, we're giving you the content of being confident with hypnosis. So the idea of confidence in general is useful here. What are they really confident in? Playing tennis, scuba diving, swimming, whatever it is, right? Or maybe have enthusiasm and enjoyment of something. Whatever emotion would support them here. However, you don't need to make any attempt to use it yet. All you're going to do is revivify it so you can have the personal trance themes, or personal trance words rather, so you collect those for later use. Does that make sense to everyone? The use of hot words as part of your revivification process, especially if it's in the beginning to kind of get them into the swing of things, might be of great value to you. Or you might use the hot words earlier on during the pre-frames to kind of warm them up to the idea of more of an emotional experience. You get the idea again? Yeah? 2 minutes apiece, 4 in total. Off you go. Okay, guys, so we've done quite a bit of stuff here so far, haven't we? Realize, of course, that we're putting this together as a system here for you, as another way of seeing all the skills you've done so far, right? You don't always have to use everything, but it's another way of putting together what you've done in a very conversational sort of format. The bit I'm really interested in, as far as this last little piece goes, is the next step. What I want you to do is introduce the idea, just the concept of a conscious mind and an unconscious mind in a way that does two things. Number one, it does not use those words. Number two, it fits the nature of the conversation you're having with this person, right? Would you like me to give an example of that kind of thing I mean? Like, what the, I will give you an example, however, on the proviso you will not use it. Right? So the more examples you ask of me, the less choice you have. So we've been talking about your confidence and so on, and it's almost like there's something in the front of your mind that wants to be confident but doesn't know how, and in the back of your mind, you've always had that confidence in certain places. When you're playing tennis, the verification, you felt the confidence you wanted there, but it's always in the back of your mind, isn't it? Do you get what we're talking about here? Front of the mind, back of the mind. These are metaphors to symbolize the conscious and the unconscious. And there are a million others, although I'm not sure if it's actually numbered that way. Do you want another example that you can't use, or would you rather just go and do it? Yeah, you're going to be a party people, I know. You guys can do this exercise, and afterwards we'll come out with a little list of things you can do here. All right, guys? So, wait a second before you start. In order to be able to emphasize this element here, I'm going to ask you to do all these other parts here more quickly, because you don't have to spend as much time on them now. And to ensure that you focus on this rather than the rest, we're going to give you a minute and a half each. Off you go. How'd that go? Was that easy? Fun? What kind of metaphors did you get for the conscious and the unconscious mind? One part, other part. One versus other part. Inside versus outside. So we had awareness versus what? Non-awareness. We're going to the non-awareness set at this point, aren't we? Logic versus emotion. Knowing, not knowing. You know? You know? So that on, off what? On, off stage. So unconscious up here and unconscious down there. Get some mic over here just to be easier to understand you then.
Sorry, the question, the specific comment was, they were potentially, my partner was potentially looking to maybe do some shows in the future. So I was using the example of when you're off stage, all of the preparation work that you do there, all of the thinking, all of the planning, then when you get on stage, it activates and it's a different experience for you. So the on-off.
I got the idea. You also used some interesting ideas that came with that. You had the idea of thinking and planning, right? What is thinking compared to? Knowing or being, right? What's planning compared against? Doing, right? What other things did you have?
Yeah, hi. I used the fact that I said that brain scans these days show that different parts of the brain light up and handle different types of functions.
There you go, parts of the brain. Do you see that we've got a really kind of a long list of possibilities here? And this is just the beginning. There's lots of other things you can do, right? Your logic versus intuition. You have, say again? Instinct versus thinking. So there's another way of changing the dichotomy in here and so on. It's less important that you memorize this list. It's more important that you understand the concept of how this list is created. Because then you can create these metaphors that will fit any conversation that you have so that they get the sense of this idea of a conscious and unconscious mind without directly having to address it. And by the way, talking in terms of conscious and unconscious minds is appropriate in many contexts, just not all of them. Get the idea? So what we're going to do with all this, we're going to go through this again, chit-chat, a little bit of informal testing, go straight to the hypnotic gaze, lock their eye contact, use your language, your yes sets and so on, your pre-frames about confidence, revivify just a little bit, introduce the idea of the conscious mind and the unconscious mind, just as you've done. What I want you to do now is you're going to riff around the idea that the conscious mind, or whatever you had for that, the one part of the mind, is where the problem is at. The unconscious mind, or the other part, or the back of the mind, or so on, is where the solution is at, or the resource, or whatever you want to call that. Do you get the idea? So all you're going to riff is around between that. Now, here is a little secret that will make your life easier. Are you interested? all the stuff you learned here, is that conscious or unconscious? Right? They may be aware of it, but they don't know how they do it. You get the idea of this? So it makes actually your life very easy, because the problem what's already there, they've told you in the chit-chat phase, well, I'm not sure if I'm going to do this at home or not, or where I want to be doing it, right? The solution part, well, the rubrification helps you with that. If not, you can actually throw some other things in there on top of that, right? The last thing that you can do in the same step here, it's all kind of part of the same thing. It's actually very easy. It's easier to do than to think about. Is to realize that there's things you can do and there's things you can do. Because sometimes you try doing things properly and they don't come out the right way. And sometimes when you don't even try, it just happens. Isn't it strange that sometimes just letting go makes it easier? I'm not saying that you can't think about stuff. I think it's an important point. But when you thought about it enough, that's when it's time to start doing something properly. And you don't really know you're doing it properly. Unless, of course, you just engaged completely in the task you are doing. Now I realize you may have some concerns about, can I do all this stuff? It's just so much stuff to keep in my mind and think about this, and I'm trying to do all this sort of thing and so on. And just realize that you don't have to do it. You can do it when you don't think. So to the extent that you try it, well, by all means, you can play with the law of reverse effect if you like, or you can enjoy it and just notice what comes out. You get the idea? Now, I've overemphasized the dichotomy, but you understand the pattern, don't you? This is a kind of a triple layer hypnotic voice. You have your regular chit-chat voice, your general hypnotic voice, and you have an extra little layer on top of that, which is reserved for special instructions to the unconscious. Do you all understand the nature of the following exercise? Yes? With your partners, I'm going to give you 2 whole minutes to play with that. I know, I'm so generous, eh? All right, guys, off you go. The final step, and this is actually a step that is true of pretty much any kind of influence process, you've got to check whether it's worked or not, right? So you either want to check whether they have some kind of a positive expectation of what's going to happen, or some kind of action. And here I would recommend this. This is one of the big mistakes that people make, is they ask for too much. Get them to just do a small step, something simple, something to get started with. Because once they get started, consciously, their unconscious mind can fill in the rest automatically. Here's an example. Most people hate doing the dishes, washing up and so on. But if you ask them to do something simple like, can you just organize the dirty dishes? So you just stack up the plates here and the forks there and so on. Well, that's an easy thing to do, isn't it? Well, once you start stacking things, well, they might as well start wiping some down. If they're wiping some down, well, the hands are wet now, so might as well get a couple of plates as well. And that might as well factor can continue to go and grow, especially if you've been using some kind of pre-vivification in your process to prepare them. Do you get the idea? So I'd like you to quickly change partners, please, now. So here's the last thing you'll do. This is an easy one. What I'd like you to do is spend about just 4 minutes chatting to the person, so 8 minutes in total, and just talk to them about what they plan on doing when they get home with this sort of stuff, right? And just see what happens. You ready? Off you go. How did that go? Who had fun with that? So what kind of things did you do? What kind of things did you experience? What surprised you? Stand up. Let's have the mic.
I don't know what I was doing.
But what was the result?
Really good.
A great result.
But
Casey deserves a round of
maybe
applause.
Joe will tell more about that because he was. I was working with him, so it was my interpretation that it was really good. But I
just
think
ask
he
him.
can say more about that.
Was it good?
It was fine, yeah, it was good. Yeah. It was just, we were just going through the experience that we've had here and the personal experience. I felt privileged that people could share with me.
Right.
And it was that part, I think, that I enjoyed the most.
Awesome. Fantastic. So congratulations. What else do you guys notice? Stand up. Over here.
I don't want to hog the mic, but I think this has been very, very significant, and for the certain sisters in the room that might have been through similar experience, I realised working with Karsten that I'd been self-hypnotising myself in the last probably year, very negatively so. I had a very profound experience with Barry, my husband, at a training in Wicklow, and I had this just expansive was all it was, this incredible shift in consciousness and everything that I'm very grateful for. But the side effect to it, unfortunately, has been, and I copped it when I was speaking with you, Karsten, I kept using words like massive, big, expanding, and I've been putting on weight and eating at an alarming rate. It's been freaking me out. And it was like, boom. It was like, oh my God, it's like I'm making space in my body for the profound experience, instead of realizing that that's been a virtual thing, not a reality. So it's like I'm getting bigger to encapsulate this experience. It's just been very strange. I don't know what I'm going to do with it yet. I'm hoping it'll make a difference. But that's been massive. Again, sorry. It's it's getting smaller in a good way.
All right, guys. Who's feeling a little bit cooked? Yeah? Who enjoyed that last session, by the way? Who surprised themselves with how much hypnosis stuff came out without even trying? Do you now understand the importance of a small step rather than a large one? I could ask you to do all of this. Yeah, you can do it. But just asking for a small step, you go in with an expectation of, yeah, I can do that, it's easy. And then all the stuff you know will come out. Now consider what this means for you when you go home. Because sooner or later, you'll be going home. And it'll probably be sooner than later. And when you do find yourself at home, you might reflect back on all these things you've learned. I mean, look at this stuff. This is all just one day. Does this seem overwhelming almost when you look at it consciously? But of course, you've been doing all this stuff without having to think about it too much. And didn't it all come out when you had to do just one simple thing? Have a chat. Intend for something good to happen, which switches on your H+, does it not? Your tonality shifts, your voice shifts, your ideas shift, your language shift. And sooner or later, you find yourself in a very intimate kind of conversation where you're doing things and saying things that you've done in here and said in here, but had no plan on doing so ahead of time because they fit now, not then. People are often in too much of a hurry to say what's on their mind. Instead of being now enough to use what's on the other person's mind as the raw materials to shape a wonderful trance process, something that will influence and change them for the rest of their life. You've all had many interactions in here. At least one of those interactions was so pleasant or profound or delightful or insightful that you are happy the person influenced you in that way, are you not? You're grateful for the person for taking the time to influence you. That's what real influence is. When you are a force for good in the world and you help people achieve what they are trying to achieve, and if in the process you get more of what you want also, isn't that what a win-win is all about? And isn't that when all the people that you influence will be deeply grateful to you for having taken the time to do so? So why wouldn't you want to influence more people if you really are this force for good? Just consider all the people that have touched your life or whose lives you have touched. Consider all those people whose lives you have yet to touch and be touched by. And realize that all you need to do is intend for something really positive to happen. That intention turns the light on inside of your hypnosis room, your H+. And isn't that when your magic flows? And you would need to know exactly what to do before you've started. It's enough that you begin with your H+ and just have a chat. A simple conversation, like conversations that you've had throughout your lifetime. And you can trust your unconscious mind will find the right words, phrases, techniques, frames, tools, suggestions to transform the situation into something better. A person who uses hypnosis like that will surely look forward to each and every opportunity for them to use these skills again and again in an appropriate way, which is to say, as a real force for good in other people's lives. Really look forward to that. Because when they transform, you'll transform right along with them. That is the nature of relationships, is it not? By helping those around you lift up to the next level, you'll be following right along with them. So by all means, allow your mind to wander through the last 3 days that have felt like so much longer than that. The simple things, the trance signals, language softeners, power words, trance themes. The interesting things, the H+, your personal trance theme, the natural rhythm, the instant rapport, the hypnotic gaze, your hypnotic voice, the principles like the agreement and the yes sets, the piggyback principles and the pre-frames, the authority, the techniques like the revivification or that conscious, unconscious dissociation you just practiced. And realize you have a very rich repertoire of tools, techniques, and abilities inside of you. And even if you were only going to use a small portion of them, your ability to influence would go far beyond anything it was in the past. Of course, you and I both know all those tools are now at the unconscious level. You've experienced it, have you not? Which means that just using one of them, anyone, no matter how small, will throw the unconscious doorways wide open to allow everything else to come out. So the only question you need to ask yourself is, which of all these tools, techniques, or ideas is the simplest or the easiest one for you to remember consciously as the door handle that lets everything else out? Doesn't that make your life easier? So with that happy thought, the only thing that really remains for me to do is to thank each of all of you for taking the time to come here, taking time out of busy lives, busy weekends, take part in all these exercises. There's been a lot of work being done here, hasn't there? To actually use your enthusiasm and your energy levels to do this all, because let's face it, you've been working hard, haven't you? You felt your brains kind of growing. You'll definitely be feeling them growing over the next week or two as things settle into place. And really, this seminar couldn't have been anything near as much fun or as transformational as I hope it's been for you guys if it hadn't been for your willingness to take part in it in the way you've done. So I want to thank all of you guys for turning up. Of course, before we go, we have a couple of other people to thank. In the back of the room, we have Megan, without whose constant supervision, nothing would work. Then, of course, we have our assistants here. We have Steve and Jakob and Eric in the back, who made it sure it's most smoothly. The last person I want to thank is here in absence. It's Cliff, of course, without whose completely overnight, long-haul marketing efforts, there wouldn't be any seats in this room, let alone a room, let alone people in those seats to actually do a seminar with. So, everyone, thank you, Cliff. And thank all of you again. Good night and see you next time.